essentially...
But who has the jurisdiction to go after these guys? That's one of the problems.
That's the problem. We are in kind of uncharted territory because we don't have the structures right now. The United Nations is run by a bunch of gangsters. A lot of the world leaders have been bribed and blackmailed into obeying these people. Okay, so what's happening is we're entering a kind of a vacuum. And we need to set up new structures, new systems, a new way of running the planet. Now,
but if the euro and the dollar become bankrupt, people are going to be really pissed, and those changes could happen pretty quickly, right?
Well, the euro is already bankrupt because you can see the IMF, which is supposedly the highest financial body on earth, is saying they don't have any money. Now when Russia went bankrupt, it was the IMF that bailed them out, and now the so-called IMF doesn't have money. That's because they don't have a legal mandate. It expired in 1994. Okay? They're just a bunch of people claiming to have the right. No one gave it to them.
And that means that these non-aligned nations you're referring to, they're not accepting the bubble money that's being created in the computers anymore? They're not accepting that equity?
It's all been blacklisted. It's kept out of the system. That's why the dollar you haven't had hyperinflation in the United States, is because that money is not being put into the system. Otherwise, all these numbers announced by the Fed, if you do the math, you'd say, well, why isn't there hyperinflation? There should be, but there isn't. Because it's not being allowed into the system. So, it is a mess, but here's the real point, okay, is that the creation of money, in a way, it's a process of deciding what we as a species do in the future, okay?
Yeah.
And it's been controlled by religious fanatics who wanted to carry out Old Testament prophecies, which is really wacko, but it's kind of mind-boggling, all right? But most of us ordinary humans, like any Miss America candidate, or pretty well any guy you pick off the street, would say, well, end poverty, stop environmental destruction, maybe make everyone rich and happy, stuff like that. I mean, it's not rocket science. That what we want in the future is not what the current set of leaders has in mind.
Yeah,
we want World War III and killing 4 billion people, and a rule of elite over a slave population. Well, we don't want that. But
right, you're actually saying that because we've revealed something in this interview that I've never heard you say publicly before, and that is that the amount of gold that's here, it's like all of the confiscating of the Roman Empire that pulled it out of these ancient places where it already was, that it all somehow made its way over to China because of silk trading and this and that, and opium.
Asia. Spice,
okay.
Silk, ceramics.
Right. So there's this massive amount of gold that could put us back on a gold standard where currency is tethered to something of real value.
Yeah, the problem with the gold standard is if you talk to the people, and the one group that supported us are the people who used to control the gold. Because, you see, as far as they're concerned, the golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really a viable alternative to fiat money, if you ask me, okay?
True.
What I personally support is we need multiple different groups that have some kind of planning function, into the future. And whatever they do has to be based on stuff that exists in the real world. There is a discipline in reality that you cannot escape. If you grow wheat, that wheat exists, and then you can put out a receipt saying, hey, this is good for wheat. But if you just put out a receipt that's backed by nothing, it doesn't exist. It's just a fact of nature.
Right.
And what I've supported is I came here when, back in the 80s when Japan was number one and it was the country of the future, and they had a system which I thought was the best we've seen so far on this planet. They had what was known as an economic planning agency. And they would draw up an idea of where we want this country to be 5 years from now, And everybody would be consulted, and people would say, we want more roads, we want more sewers, we want more schools, we want to have a space station, whatever it was. And then they would draw up detailed plans. The Bank of Japan would go around and figure out how much money they could print that was backed by real stuff without causing inflation. And,
Sure.
Backed by real stuff, it means real estate, gold, rice, anything real. And then they would, private industry would actually carry it out. And what they had was they had fast economic growth for decades, very fast, close to 10% a year. They had the lowest gap between the poor and the rich in any developed country, and probably any country on earth. And it was the Americans who came in and bullied them and forced them to dismantle that system, which was why they've had stagnation for the past 23 years. The Chinese are still using a system similar to the old Japanese system, which is why they still have fast economic growth.
Wow. Okay.
So what I'm saying is that you need some people who are selected because they're very smart, because they passed a good exam, who are given the job of carrying out people's wishes in a realistic manner. And so everybody says this is what we want the world to be in 5 years, and then these guys try to make it real by focusing on numbers and stuff that can actually be done. Now, I'm not saying we want a single planning agency for the whole planet. I'm saying this could be one of many competing groups trying to create new projects for the future.
Sure.
The CIA guys and these people I talk to, and the Rothschild faction that's helping us, they want their own new offshore centers where they could carry out their own plans and projects for the planet. And that's fine. I don't think we want a centralized, control network. But we do need to make sure that anything that does exist is disciplined by reality. It has to be based in something real. Like, the system should be that if someone takes a log and carves it into a totem pole, they've created money.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be some guy with a computer, some powerful oligarch with a computer punching in numbers and acting like God, which is what we have now.
Sure.
And the other thing, of course, is that if you look at reality right now, the fact of the matter is that the European countries and the United States and Australia, they have been getting more stuff from the rest of the world than they've been giving. That's just a fact. And that
right.
means
The only export they have really is financial products, which basically is just bubble money.
And weapons.
Weapons, right.
But the United States has the world's best universities still. They have a very intelligent, well-educated, hardworking population, and they have all this high tech that's being suppressed for so-called national security reasons.
Right.
So we can get these scumbags out of power in the Federal Reserve Board and free the American people. The potential for a boom such as never been seen before is right there. It's ready. But first, we have to let the old system collapse. These guys are not going to go quietly into the night. They're threatening war still. They're still trying to attack Iran. They're still threatening. I've had reports now that they're planting nuclear bombs in the seabed off the shore of Tokyo to try to create another tsunami here.
Jesus.
They're up to all sorts of nasty stuff, and we have to stop them.
Now, you've said before that one of the enforcement arms that could come into play now that you've driven the wedge with this lawsuit is the Pentagon, the good guys in the Pentagon, could at some point actually do mass arrests at gunpoint of, as you've said, I believe most of the House of Representatives and the Senate, because these guys have private accounts in the Vatican Bank and they've been bribed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so you're talking about media heads of the top 5 media companies that have been controlling the media to promote this agenda?
Well,
these guys are preparing to move on that at some point, right?
That's the problem, is that they're not quite sure what to do next. There's a lot of confusion, okay, because it's sort of like, it's one thing to say, all right, let's put these guys in jail, but then they say, well, now what? And there's no coherent plan in place for what's next. I mean, Keenan and his people, they have their ideas. I've got mine. Other people have their own plans they're all pushing, but what I do believe, though, is that, yes, you need to get the out-and-out criminals out of power. Okay? Put them under house arrest. You don't have to put them in jail. Like, most of them, it's one of those systems. It's sort of like, you know, I don't know if you saw the movie Scorpion King, but one of these movies where you come in to the top of the pyramid, you beat the guy in a sword fight, and you show up at the top of the stairs with the head in hand, and everybody bows down to you. Right. Oh, you know? And most of these guys are used to that pyramid system, you know?
Right.
If you change the top, it's like they automatically go along with the new program and say, well, hey, you know, I was just following the pharaoh, you know?
Right.
So it could be a system where you don't even have to put anybody in jail. You just say, okay, we've changed plan now. There's a new game plan, and instead of building pyramids, now you're going to be building universities. And they'll say, okay, you know, let's go for it. So, but having said that, there are a lot of incompetent gangsters at the highest levels of power who shouldn't be there.
Right.
They don't know how to run a country, and they don't know how to run a planet, and they don't belong in that job. And I mean Obama, among others. His record proves it. You know?
Well, I think he's folded way too many times to the pressure groups around him.
Okay, he's a pup. That's a fact of the matter, you know. But the point is that what we do need is we need to have, as quick as possible, an open debate. We want to get everybody in on it. We don't want this, you know, so that we can say, all right, what are we going to do next? It's one thing to get rid of the old system, but if you don't have anything ready in place, you end up with chaos, you end up with a loss of civilization, you know, you end up with collapse of order, and that's one thing that we all agree we don't want. There's got to be a transition towards a better way of running the planet that's not going to destroy but build, you know?
Well, I don't mean to play devil's advocate here, but if the Asian secret societies and the non-aligned nations have put this squeeze play where, as of our interview, November 28th, there's stuff in the news saying the euro isn't even going to last 10 days, we don't have a lot of time to make those decisions. Right?
Well,
I mean, because people are going to start suffering when these collapses that you guys apparently have helped to engineer finally happen.
Well, unfortunately, because the people in power in the United States, in Washington and Wall Street, and in Europe are being very stubborn, they're sort of acting like Hitler was at the end of World War II. Yeah. I'll let Germany collapse before I move from power.
Right.
Is that there's going to be a really tough winter in the United States and Europe as things stand now, because these guys are not going peacefully and quietly into the night. They're not accepting that we need a fundamental change in how we run this planet. And that is why it's going to be a tough winter unless you hurry up and get these guys out.
Well, and they're going to have incredibly powerful disinformation campaigns that will do everything they can to make you appear to be a fool, and that everything you're saying is a lie.
Sure.
And that if this group actually succeeds, that it's the New World Order, and it's the Illuminati, and it's fascism and martial law, and FEMA camps, and all the stuff that they've been trying to get people afraid of. So how do you counter that?
Well, the reality of the situation is stronger than the propaganda, okay?
Right.
I mean, they can talk all they want. It's like they say, well, now I've got $1 quintillion. See, it's in my computer. All right, go try to spend it. See what happens, you know?
Right.
See how far you get with that. When Bush was trying to flee to Paraguay and they stopped him, okay? Let's see what happens when he takes his black card or whatever they have and goes to the store and they say, sorry, can't buy anything. These guys will be just street trash once their money is frozen, and it's being frozen.
Well, now you had said before, I mean, right now you're saying there isn't really a consensus with the Pentagon in terms of when or if to do these so-called mass arrests.
I don't know. Look, what I do know is that the Pentagon people always told me they're waiting for this lawsuit to be a trigger, okay?
Okay.
And now there's a lot of, okay, well, it's there. We understand that the system is rotten and broken, but we're not quite sure what to do next. And there's a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiating and talking and running around. And as things stand, unfortunately, it looks like things are going to have to get more chaotic before these people's minds are concentrated enough that they're ready to start building new systems, new agreements to share this planet.
Right.
But the basic one that I have said as an operating principle is that Western and Asian civilization need to start out with an exactly 50-50 deal that underlines whatever it is we start building on top of the old system. We don't want suddenly, Europeans and Americans to be taking orders from Asians, and the Asians are tired of having Europeans tell them what to do. We need to have a forum where we reach a consensus. We both agree, yes, that's a good idea. Build a space colony. Okay, good idea. Let's do it.
What side would all the Islamic countries be in that 50-50?
The Islamic countries are basically with us, except for a few colonies that are still, controlled by the cultists pretending to be Muslims. Okay.
Okay.
But essentially, they're just afraid of ending up the way Gaddafi did, and so they're keeping their heads low. But they're essentially with us.
Okay.
And what we really need to do now is to get the Jewish people to realize that their leaders, a lot of them were part of an insane cult, and that they shouldn't allow those people to speak for them as a people. Because these are the same people behind the Holocaust,
Right. The atrocity is too boggling for most people's mind to even wrap around.
Exactly. That's what they were counting on. It's just too big for people to wrap their minds around.
Now,
but all this is provable,
Right, and